that was the actual first startup of this engine in this car. So the Holley Terminator X definitely is a nice unit. This is the third one I've set up. If you cross your I's and dot your T's, usually won't have a problem with them. I know a lot of people get into trouble with them if they're not following the directions and don't know what they're doing. But today I'm going to try to go over the wiring with you guys. I'm going to try to keep it as entertaining as possible. I know this isn't very entertaining stuff, but I'm going to try to keep it clipped and fast-paced. And try to go over the important items that are needed and try and block out the rest. This is a green power wire that I ran through the harness for the starter. It's easier if you just do it now before you put the harness in. That way you don't have to worry about running a power wire to the starter after the harness is already done. The next thing we're going to go over is here in the e-box. This is the automatic transmission connector. This has two pairs of twisted wires, red and blue. Both of these wires are going to have to be crimped together in order for this system to work right. If you just leave this connector unplugged, the wiper's going to go crazy. The CAN system's not going to be communicating. It's not going to be happy. So you got to cut and crimp red to red, blue with red, but blue to red. Stripped and crimped right here. Ended up using some non-insulated butt connectors. I like these better than soldering. Right here, I'll leave the link in the description with some heat shrink end caps here. These ones are the type that have like the glue inside of them. Helps keep moisture out. But see, blue with red blue to red, red to red. That should be taken care of for the CAN bus system. This thicker black wire on the white connector is going to be the starter wire, so we're going to cut that. That's going to get attached to that green wire that is running down to our starter. That's one's actually going to come out of the car and send the signal to the starter to start the thing up. We have our 6 drive-by wires broken out. The 2 yellows, the 2 browns, and the 2 whites. The browns get tied together, the yellows get tied together. Then these are going to be our pedal signals. We also have this black and blue wire broken out of the connector for the fan. The 2 PT CAN wires from Mike's box. This blue and red wire for a brake signal. It's going to end up going to pin 41, I think, on the CAS module. We're going to get these pinned out using a Deutsch connector, just like Mike's video. Like, just watch his video. It's going to be way better than this one. This is just kind of a follow along of his video, but it is nice and clean, so it's definitely the way I'm going to do it. So we're going to get these wired up to, like I said, this 12-pin Deutsch connector. We've got our wires that we need from the car side of the harness wired into this connector. Drive-by wire, CAN, starter wire, fan control wire that's going to get hooked up to the output harness on the Holley Terminator. All these other wires I'm just going to kind of tuck in here for right now until I get everything running and situated, and then I'll figure out what else I can cut out of here to make some more room in this box. Continuing on with the wiring, we've got the harness made up here for the body side harness to the Holley Terminator harness. Black to green, that's going down to my starter. Red to red and blue to blue for the CAN wires that go into Mike's CAN box. We've got yellow on the drive-by wire harness, which would be the pedal side, yellow to white. Then we've got orange to yellow, black to brown, and blue to the white with yellow stripe in the car side. An output wire hooked up, this gray-yellow output wire. You can choose any of the gray ones. They're all 4 of them are outputs. You just got to remember which one you have it on. And that's going to be for our black and blue for the fan control. So we're going to set up an output in the Holley Terminator control software to turn on the fan when we want it to. And that's going to just feed this black-blue wire with a pulse width modulated signal to turn the fan on and off. One piece of advice for the wiring is you can't always rely on the BMW wiring diagrams. A lot of the times this stuff's wrong. I was just kind of looking for that wire that you have to splice into the brake signal wire. So it's that one that we cut out of the gray connector. I was trying to find out which one to match that up to. This one, this blue with a red wire, has to get sent to pin 41 on the CAS. According to the wiring diagram from ISTA, which I use every day at work, this blue with black is supposed to be in pin 1. It's definitely not pin 1. That's pin 1 right there. The other side of the connector clearly has that black-blue wire at pin 5. So I wanted to make sure that this was the correct wire. So I did a continuity check. Basically just put your meter on ohms, stick it in slot 5 here for that blue with black wire, take it over to the CAS module and check for continuity between it and the CAS module that sits right up in here. A little dark, I don't have my flashlight, but there's this black connector that goes to the CAS module right here, pin 41. I took this outer sleeve off with just these 2 retainer clips right here, and it slides right off. Pin 41 on the CAS does ohm out with that other wire from the blue-black under the hood on that pin 5. So the wiring diagram was wrong, but it is the right wire. So I'm going to be splicing those 2 together. So there we go. We've got the brake signal wire, the blue with the red, spliced up with the blue and black wire that goes to the CAS module. That's going to tell our, or at least give 12 volts to the CAS module whenever we press the brake pedal, insinuating that the car is in dry or in park and ready to start. So that should be the last of the wiring here as far as the stock side of the wiring. Got the first power cable done. Got it hooked up to the larger 13mm stud. This is hot at all times. This one's lightly fused, I think, 20 or 30 amps from that battery distribution fuse block that sits on top of the battery in the back of the car. But this main stud is what we're going to use for the alternator and starter. So this is some 1 gauge cable with some terminal ends that I crimped on using a hydraulic crimper from Amazon. Thing works great. Some terminals. We covered it in wire loom and then heat shrunk the ends of it. It gives it a nice kind of professional look. But I'm going to run it through here. This is where the stock power cable would run from the alternator on the N51. So I kind of like the way that looks. Whatever. It actually ends up in its own holder over here too. It'll clip in real nice right there. And this is going to be our power cable from the start point to the starter. Got it wrapped up in some DEI heat wrap. It's going to be real close to the headers down at this point. But it'll fit just fine. Just kind of using whatever fittings I had around. I'm kind of running low, so I had to use a 1/2-inch stud one here, but it'll work just fine. Gonna get sit on there, and then it's gonna go kind of around the motor mount onto the stud on the starter, like such. The header and the power cable there, along with the heat wrap, I think will be okay. Don't forget about your ground strap. I used one of the front bolts here on the front of the block and ran it down around the motor mount to factory ground point location right here. That should be good enough ground for the entire engine. I might add another one on this side, somewhere over here, one of those maybe front mounting points there, to maybe somewhere on the frame over here, or maybe that ground lug, the factory ground lug on the passenger side. Things real temporary right now, just everything's plugged in. I just finished up doing the wizard on the Terminator X on the handheld there. I have the switch power just right to real power right now, or constant power, just so I could get it running, and then I'll run everything into the car and make everything nice and pretty once I know this engine runs. TPS auto set was successful first time, awesome. So this is going to be the legit first startup. Let's see what happens. This like fucking packed together wiring just so I could get it to run, but it fucking runs. Fired up half a crank. Man, I really wasn't expecting that. I knew it would probably start, but didn't know if I was gonna have some kind of weird rod knock or some kind of weird noise, a lifter noise or whatever. It's got some cheap lifters in it. In this motor, the bottom end at least has been sitting around for like literally 15 years wrapped up in cellophane. So I'm just glad that it runs. It sounded good. So we're going to get this wiring cleaned up under the hood. I am going to drop the junction box in the front to get to the DME box fan to be able to run some wires down through the car, inside of the car for 2-step activation, switch 12-volt key power wire, my fuel pump wire that we're going to be running back to a relay. So I'll give you a look at that. Box out here to get access to the back of this fuse box and that E-box fan that lives right back there. A note on this power wire that I was going to use for the switch power for the Terminator. This is the wiring diagram. So the junction box goes right to one leg, goes to the front cigarette lighter, the other leg breaks off and goes to the other two, which is fuse 8 right here. This is 20 amp mini fuse. I was going to put a fuse tap in there. It's not deep enough to fit all the way in there because the box is pretty recessed. The fuses are pretty recessed in there, so this doesn't even contact the blades back there. So I'm just going to tie into the back of the fuse box here. It'll be protected by that 20 amp mini fuse. This green with white stripe, there's 2 of them that go into the back of this blue connector. That's what's coming out of that 20 amp mini fuse. You can use either one of these. One leg is going out to the rear, or I'm sorry, the front cigarette lighter, and then the other leg is splitting off and going to the other 2. Tapping into either one of these green with yellow stripe wires will be that good 12 volt key on ignition wire that we'll use for the Terminator X. So I'll just cut this like here and splice it in. Since my fuse tap didn't work, it wouldn't go deep enough into the box, I ended up wiring in the switch 12 volt and another switch 12 volt for the trans harness right into the back of this. So we got the DME E-box fan out. All I did was kind of peel the carpet back down in here. This bracket bolts down to like basically the firewall, like straight back, kind of underneath the carpet right there. Just a single 10 millimeter, and then you can kind of pull this bracket back enough to be able to get your hands on that E-box fan. That little E-box fan sits plugged in, like clipped into that housing right there, and then this plugs into a wire that comes out of that thick harness down here. It's like a fat white connector. You'll see it once you start playing with it, that white connector right there. So you just unplug it and kind of like rock it back and forth and just kind of yank it off. It'll come right off, and then you have a nice hole here that's kind of like nice and plastic. It's not sharp metal or anything, and those wires will come right through that hole real nice. And you can see where I put it through the DME box, so they can kind of just go straight down through here, and then they'll end up down inside of the car. So obviously no thick harnesses are going to fit through there unless you kind of, I've seen other people cut this section out, and then it's just kind of a nice big hole that you can run everything through. If you wanted to run the entire harness through and into the glove box like a lot of people do, I'm probably just going to leave everything crammed up into this DME box. Here I am on a side quest.
Quest? I'm already on a quest.
That I didn't want to be on, but I knew it was going to happen anyway. I knew the evaporator was leaking when I got this car. It could smell Freon coming through the vents. And it had really low charge pressure. Some dye on the drain on the underside of the vehicle too. So I really didn't want to do it, but here we are. Got the dash out, crash bar out. We're going to be doing an evaporator and a heater core because we're going in there, so I'm definitely doing both. Not a fun job, don't recommend it. Working on the clutch line today. We have the Fabot clutch line kit. So it comes with this pre-made clutch line that goes from the clutch pedal to the inside of the transmission for the throwout bearing. It has a nice quick connect on the clutch pedal here. See it right in the center. That piece gets clipped in with a new clip. If you're missing that clip like I was, you can buy it separately. I'll put the part number for it in the description of this video. So you can see here I do have the manual pedals installed in the vehicle. Super easy. It was 1 brake pedal pin and 3 bolts, and that whole brake pedal comes out. Swapped in the manual ones. We have this new clutch line installed through this grommet in the firewall here. Kept the grommet because it's kind of right where the exhaust is, so I try to keep as much heat out of here as possible. Just kind of made a slit in it and ran that line through it. Pop the grommet back in, and we're going to connect it up to the master cylinder here on the clutch pedal. And then the other line goes through the firewall right next to the clutch master cylinder right there to go up to the brake fluid reservoir, where we'll connect it to one of the nipples, and then we'll get starting on bleeding. If you feel like spending an extra 50 bucks, here's the part number for the OEM rubber boot on a 128 or a 135 for a manual transmission. Seals up nice and tight in the hole there. And here's the part number for the fancy Alcantara boot that BMW sells for 128 or 135 too. Fits in there nice. Okay, so we're getting kind of close on wiring, finishing wiring. I have most of the engine harness ran kind of where I want to, just down the valve covers there. I did have to run an extra wire from the AC compressor. So that's the activation wire for the AC compressor. I did run that through the harness all the way around with a couple of other things with the alternator harness and the drive-by-wire harness. So I just kind of loomed those all in one over to the passenger side. As we got to the box, it's really full. We already wired the output for the cooling fan. I also ran a wire inside of the car that I have hooked up to an input for a two-step. I also have wired up a input here from the black-white wire that I ran through the boot down and around to the AC pressure switch, or pressure switch down there next to the washer fluid nozzle. That's going to be our AC pressure input for the Holley. So I have that wired as an input to our white-blue wire. And then I just finished up wiring this gray-red wire, which is going to be an output. That's going to trigger this relay, and that's going to send power from the fused smaller stud through the relay out to the compressor. So we have pretty much everything wired up at this point. I have to make a couple more connections inside of the car and loom a couple of more things here and then finalize the wiring in this area so that it's going to fit nicely with the lid closed. Running the constant power for the Terminator X, the actual ECU plug, the big one, right to the battery terminal post. This one is not fused, it goes directly to the battery, so counts, right? Sure. And then we ended up running our red wire, power wire from the Terminator X harness for the injectors to this post, and this is also a power wire for the relay and AC compressor. Got both grounds hooked up over here on the ground stud. I did end up cutting off these things off of the factory harness there. It actually worked out really nice. I mean, the lid should close up and be sealed just like it was factory because it's got all 4 grommets on the top, and the Terminator X harness fits like really nice through there. So I have it running down, zip tied to the brake line right there, along with all the other harnesses that are kind of coming out. And then it's tucked behind this heat shield right here. I had to buy a new one because as soon as I touched it, it ripped out of the bottom. So got a new heat shield. We got the harness kind of tucked behind there as best as possible. And then it runs down, back towards the firewall. And it's also tucked behind this heat shield that runs along the back of the firewall as well. So we have nice good clearance with the exhaust. There's no wires hanging down near the exhaust right there. That's about as close as it's going to get. It's going to be plenty fine. Starter wire still has pretty good clearance between the headers as well, so we should be in good shape there. Especially once the cowling goes on right here, this is all going to be hidden, and this is going to be running that cowl, so it should look pretty nice when it's all put together. I still have to run the wiring inside of the car. We do have a couple of wires that we ended up running through that grommet there. Input wire for a 2-step. Green wire is going to go to fuel pump. So I'm going to have to run that down here. I'll up along the back until I get to the back for the fuel pump there. I'm going to go over fuel pump wiring. There's probably a dozen different ways you could do this. The stock EKPS control module for the fuel pump lives right here, at least on a 1 series and most 3 series. You can leave this plugged in totally intact. Don't even have to play with it. It just runs the fuel pump at 100% all the time as soon as the key is turned on. That's how I started the car the first time for just the initial startup. It works just fine. The only thing you're going to run into is anytime you have the key on, making a change to your tune or checking for powers and grounds or doing any other kind of wiring issue on the vehicle. Anytime you'd have the key on, it's just running the fuel pump all the time. These EKPSs are also very common to fail. So I'm going to delete it and just run a relay in its place. These 2 wires come directly from the fuel pump, so this is fuel pump wiring. It's plugged into a little small black connector on that EKPS. Took the ground wire, grounded it, so the fuel pump is always grounded. The red and white stripe wire is going to get its power from this relay when the relay is activated. The power into the relay for the fuel pump is getting supplied by the red and black wire down here that ran into the white connector. It's a hot at all times fused wire. I'm just using a stock fuel pump, so I don't need some kind of crazy gauge wire. The stock BMW wiring size is going to be just fine for the stock BMW fuel pump. So this is where it's going to get its power from when the relay is switched. The relay itself is also grounded through the brown wire off of that same white connector. You can also ground it right to here too. I had just already crimped this before I thought about grounding this black relay wire as well. So I just went to the brown wire that was already supplied, ohmed it out. It's full-time ground too. And then we have our control wire, which is this white wire. This is the one that's going to activate the relay. It's going to supply 12 volts from the Holley green wire. I switched it over to a red wire and ran it all the way back to here. And this is going to, anytime the key is turned on, the Holley is going to supply 12 volts to this white wire. It's going to click the relay, and then it's going to send power through the relay down to the fuel pump. Should work just fine. And until I have to redo my fuel system, this is probably how I'm going to rock it. Right, so we are like right here. Cooling system, vacuum bled, filled, no air pockets in the system. I got a bunch of idle time on it. I've got a couple of drive cycles on it now, just kind of going around the neighborhood. Everything seems to be in really good shape. BMW cooling system seems to be awesome so far. I put a 160-degree thermostat in it, and the thing won't get above like 180 degrees. And like I have the fan turned on at 185, and it's like barely even turning the fan on. So it seems like it's working really, really well. I'm hopefully in the wintertime, I don't have to change the thermostat out to like 180-degree thermostat so that I can, you know, have some heat inside of the cabin, but we'll mess with that when the time comes. As of right now, it's you're running about 180 degrees pretty much all the time right now, but we've also got like awesome weather out recently, so we'll see how that works out. But right now, got all the covers back on. Like I said, a bunch of idle time, a couple of drive cycles on it. I was having a pretty big issue with the car basically shutting off when I hit 4,000 RPMs, no load or at a light load. It would do it while I was driving, or it would do it while I was standing in the driveway and just free revving it. It would hit 4,000 RPMs and basically just shut off. But I was able to correct that issue. I'm going to make a separate video about it. It was a faulty crankshaft sensor. I had to get a different brand. But I'll make another video about what I did to kind of like diagnose that issue and see if it helps anybody else that's having a similar issue. But otherwise, it is pretty much ready to go at this point. I'm just going to kind of focus on cleaning the car up a little bit more. And then I'll get you in the car with some videos of it driving down the road, hopefully some exhaust clips. And so that's a wrap on the car. We've got the engine and transmission in, the Holley wiring done. There's still a couple of small items that I'm going to be doing, finishing up, probably making videos too, on hopefully using Pro Tools to delete all of the lights on the dash so that we can get rid of that and have a fully functioning light-free dash. I'll probably be making a video on the Holley setup too, just for anybody that's kind of new to the Holley system, just kind of setting up base maps, trying to get the car at least running and driving well enough. I do plan on doing the entire tune to this vehicle myself, including like wide open throttle pulls and all of that, so I'll kind of give you an idea of what looks like going through the Holley software. It's kind of my first time tuning a vehicle from start to finish, so that's kind of exciting too. Closing thoughts on the car. This is probably the most fun I've had building a full vehicle like this, or just like a SPOP in general, because of how easy it was from start to finish. It took about exactly 3 months working on it once, at the most twice a week for a few hours after work, and maybe here and there on a weekend when I could get time to go out into the garage and get some stuff done. What really helped was being able to do like 3 or 4 months of research in advance and kind of stockpiling all of the parts that I was going to need, so that every time I could get to the garage, I could just get right into it and go ham and trying to, blast out as much as I could all at once. And it really helped having all of the parts that I knew were going to be necessary at the garage ready to go. So hopefully a couple of these videos helped at least 1 or 2 of you guys putting one of these together. It was, like I said, really enjoyable that everything fit up, bolted up, all the gauges work, integrates into the chassis really well. The engine and trans feel really, really good in this car. It feels like it's pretty effortlessly pushing the car around so far, and I really haven't gotten into it too much. But like I said, there'll be a couple more videos of the car making some pulls and making some cool noises and stuff. So hope you guys enjoyed the build. Thank you.